Welcome to the Friday Happy Hour with victory strategist, award-winning author and your happy hour host, Annmarie Kelly. Each week, Annmarie chats with women who have reinvented, started over or wrote fabulous next chapters. They share how they overcame their midlife challenges and how you can too. So kick back with some good happy hour something to drink and enjoy today's show.
All of my friends tell me that I'm the good girl, yes they do. They all see me as being so perfect, little Miss Goody Two Shoes. If I do something a little risque, they all gasp and I just say, good girl.
Hi and welcome. You're listening to the Friday Happy Hour with me, Annmarie Kelly, and I'm that recovering good girl and your Victorious Woman Empowerment Partner. And this is where us Victory Chicks and you guys who love us meet on Fridays to chat about things we can do to make our lives better, more fulfilling, and give us a little more jazz and sparkle. I'm loving that you're here today. I know I can't see you, but I always think I can picture you in my mind. So I'm glad you're here with me today. You know, today's guest has a background and had a career that is probably not like any one of us. Adria Firestone is an opera singer. She sang all over the world until a few years ago when she got to midlife, she crashed and burned, and then she had to figure out what to do next. And that's the part where you, me, and Adria have some common ground. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. And Adria's here. We'll be talking to her in just a little bit. Say, have you noticed the full moon? I'm here in Van Morrison, inside my head, all day, 24/7 since yesterday. You know, it's a beautiful night for a moon dance. It's almost on a continuous loop in my brain. And this month, it's a blood moon. That means it'll have a reddish tinge. And it's a lunar eclipse, which I think is why it turns red. The news says it's the longest one of the century. Of course, the century's only 18 years old. But that's not very exciting to say. Not as much as the longest one of the century. So that's kind of exciting. It's tonight. Though, you know what? I think the best place to see it is in Europe. Listen, allowing for the 5-hour time difference, if you leave now, you'll probably get there just in time to see it. Oh, wait. You say you have other plans and can't just jump on a plane? Well, too bad. Then maybe this weekend you can watch. There's a show on Fox News that's called Objectified. Now, I know some of you hate Fox News. It's like the devil. But this isn't a news show. From a programming perspective, think of it like this. It's like with one CNN does on, you know, about specific times in our history. Both of them, Objectified and the shows on CNN, aren't hard news or opinion shows like they are during the week. That they're just entertainment. So here's the thing about this Objectified show. It's a regular show, but I am finding it fascinating. The host is TMZ's Harvey Levin, and he goes to the house of some famous person. He tells them to get a couple objects that had some meaning to them in their lives. And then he interviews them and has them tell the stories about these different objects. So he's done Kris Jenner and Dr. Phil and Magic Johnson. And last week it was Steven Tyler's turn. You know, Steven Tyler from Aerosmith and American Idol. So during the interview, which I found absolutely incredible, Tyler was talking about his relationship with his Italian father, as well as his music, his life during Aerosmith, and the breakups and stuff, and so much more. He was very candid about his long and storied history as a drug user. Tyler's like the poster child for the whole sex, drugs, and rock and roll thing. So here's why I'm talking about it today. This week, the Grammy-winning singer Demi Lovato was taken to the hospital for overdosing on drugs. Now, apparently, she's been off drugs for 6 years, but recently fell off that proverbial wagon. Well, here's the thing. She's only 25 years old. That means she was in rehab at 19. If she was in rehab at 19, she must have spent her entire teenage years as a drug addict. Now, for someone like me who doesn't do drugs and never did, that sounds almost impossible. But wait, when I was hearing that news this week, I was thinking about something Steven Tyler said about the accessibility of drugs and how they broke up the boredom of his work. Not the creative part, but doing shows and singing the same song over and over and over again, and doing it because that's what your audience is coming to your show for, and that's what they want. They're paying to hear you perform, even if you've done that song a couple thousand times. So Steven Tyler said the drugs made that repetitive performing doable, that it was a whole different trip each time instead of the same old, same old. So, I can kind of understand that because there are workshops I've delivered a bunch of times, and it's hard to keep the material fresh. Not necessarily for my participants, but for me. I think putting something extra in helps me get, from getting bored, like a new story or something like that. But I can see that being a dilemma. So I wondered if all the musicians do drugs and do it for that reason, just to stay fresh. I could buy that with some heavy metal groups. But then I was thinking about Lady Gaga and Tony Bennett. I can't picture them smoking some weed before singing Cheek to Cheek, or doing some drugs prior to recording Baby It's Cold Outside. Just the thought of that makes me laugh. Picture the 90-year-old Bennett passing a joint to the 30-something Gaga. Does that picture not give you a giggle? But then I thought, I was never a drug user, but from Tyler's perspective, I could see how it can become an addiction. For me, it was food. For you, it might be alcohol or golf or video games. I'll bet there's something that has the same accessibility for each of us that drugs had for Steven Tyler and now Demi Lovato. I've certainly eaten junk food out of boredom or stress. And geez, for that matter, give me an emotion, I'll tell you what food I would eat to deal with it. That's how I ended up in a 12-step program and later a behavior modification program. And though I lost 50 pounds a while back, I couldn't keep it off. I fell off that proverbial wagon and gained about half of that back. These days I get back on the food wagon from time to time. You know how it is, a stint at Nutrisystem, a half year going to Weight Watchers, some kind of cleanse. It's a hard thing. And, speaking about hard things that are emotional, the actor-comedian Roseanne was on Sean Hannity last night. I was curious to see what she was going to say. And it was her first interview since she got kicked off her show. And Roseanne's always been something of a loose cannon. But personally, if Samantha Bee and some of the other people can apologize for and avoid not getting kicked off their shows, Roseanne shouldn't have been kicked off either. Just like them, she should have been allowed to do the mea culpa tour, still kept her job. It's kind of scary to me. It's no different than McCarthyism. Back in those days, I could think that it was in the 1950s, it was the opposite. The people who were vilified were the liberals and the haters were the conservatives. Well, it wasn't right then and it's not right now. But apparently now it's acceptable, and that's scary. To me, it's scary. And I'll tell you something that's not right either. I was in Costco last Saturday, and a woman was putting out thermal T-shirts. And then I walked into Joann Fabric, and they were putting out fall wreaths. And Staples is all back to school. On my way home, I stopped into Giant, and there were boxes and boxes of spice wafers. I just wanted to scream. I felt like I was on a bicycle going downhill, and the brakes didn't work, and then I couldn't stop. You know what I mean? I'm just not ready for the fall or Halloween or the holidays or snow. And I don't want somebody pushing them on me. Time just goes too fast already. So don't you sometimes just want to stop for a little bit? I want to be able to walk outside without a jacket and a hat, go to the beach and get sand between my toes, and be in places with lots of greens surrounding me and no thermal or spice, anything. Now, seriously, is that too much to ask? And when I'm in the environment, I am so much better at being the artist of my life, which is what we're talking to Adria Firestone about today. Here's why I invited Adria to our happy hour. Adria had an award-winning international career in opera and music theater. When she was 50, things shifted in a way that many of you will recognize. She didn't have an easy time of it, but she got back on top. And now her passion is to empower women both personally and professionally. We had some conversation a few weeks back, and I wanted to share that with you. I wanted to share her with you. So we're going to take a break now, and you go get happy hour something to drink, and when we come back, Adria Firestone will be with us. You're listening to the Friday Happy Hour. Are you one of those women who lived the first part of your life as a really good girl? That is, you did all the right things and followed all the so-called rules for women? I was like that too. But have you noticed that once you passed 40, you have less patience for those rules? Maybe you even think that the rules really don't make sense for you anymore. Maybe they never did and you just didn't realize it. Do you want to go where other recovering good girls meet to inspire each other and support their new empowered selves? Then join me, Annmarie Kelly, and some very fabulous victorious women. We're on Facebook at the Victorious Woman Project. So go to facebook.com/Victorious Woman Project. I'll talk to you there. Welcome back to the Friday Happy Hour. I'm Annmarie Kelly, and here's Adria Firestone. Buongiorno, Adria.
Buongiorno, Annmarie. How are you, my dear?
I'm very well. How about yourself?
Oh, I'm doing great. I'm doing great, and we do have a full moon to howl at, so we can do that, and we can lift our glasses to the full moon.
Absolutely.
That sounds like a plan.
Yeah. Audrey, listen, you were listening to what I was saying about Steven Tyler, weren't you?
Yes.
So, you know, like I get that in rock and roll and heavy metal and stuff. I would think your background is in opera, and I would think that opera singers would be a little bit more careful. But did you notice that same thing about drugs or addiction when you were traveling, or were they all Italians and they just ate like I do?
No, I would say that one of the reasons, I'm not saying it doesn't exist in the world of opera, but it is, I think, a bit less because when you're singing opera, versus even musical theater, which I had one foot on each road. You're doing an Olympic style of singing. In other words, you're like an Olympic athlete. For you to be able to fill a hall without a microphone of 3,000 people over an orchestra of 63, 83 pieces, you need to be in such excellent physical condition that you can't afford to mess with yourself. I was in some of the most fabulous places on the planet, and I could only do a limited amount of sightseeing, for example, because I knew that I had to get on stage that night, and I had to perform, and I had to be at a certain level. So that always, I think, kept me in line, and also I think I was afraid. I was I was afraid of drugs because I figured I was already so intense. I'm Italian and Spanish and Cuban. So if I got any more intense, I thought that they would have to peel me off the ceiling. So I was very afraid.
Yeah, you probably didn't need a lot of anything to get ginned up, huh?
Right. Absolutely.
Well, listen, Adria, let's tell my listeners a little bit about your past. You had an interesting career as an opera singer. You said you were in all kinds of fascinating places. But I'm always a little curious with people, especially. I'm especially curious about opera because it's not like as mainstream as some other kinds of music might be. So, first of all, when did you know you could sing?
Well, first of all, I was brainwashed. I was brainwashed by my grandmother, by my little Italian Calabrese grandmother. And what happened is that she would translate the operas. We would listen to the Texaco broadcasts when I was a little kid. And she would translate what was happening. Butterflies coming, is watching Pinkerton as he's coming up the hill, and his boat is in the harbor, and this is what she's saying. And I would cry, and she would cry. And I saw that she loved it so much. And she was, for me, the most beautiful, most blessed being on this planet. She was my savior. And because I loved her so much, I was inspired to imitate the singers. And by 7, 8 years old, 6, 7, 8, I was already singing. I could sing Umberdi when I was 8 years old.
Wow.
So there was just something that, first of all, it made her so happy. And I loved all of these tales that she told me, I thought, what a beautiful world to be involved in that world. So that delighted me. I think that pulled me like a magnet. And I also loved musicals, and I loved dance, and I loved acting. And so it was all one big interesting ball of wax that I was, I think, very privileged to be able to be in both worlds. It wasn't without its difficulties, because the opera conductors would get very annoyed with me and say, "Oh, you sound so poppy. I can't stand it. You sound poppy." And so then, it would take a week of rehearsal that I would come back to a purely operatic way of, which is, it's just a style. And then people, when I would do musical theater, they would think I was just going to be an opera singer and I could only sing something once in a rehearsal. Well, in musical theater, you do 8 shows a week. So
I don't know how they do that.
It's hard. Again, it requires a great deal of physical strength. It requires you play tricks with your mind to be able to keep it fresh. And you use what you're going through in your life to color what you're doing on stage.
And that's sort of what I do when I do a workshop. Like I try and change up my stories, just to keep it like a little bit
because
different.
If we're bored, well, Annmarie, we're going to be boring.
Yeah.
So we have to be stimulated and excited with what we're sharing.
But Adria, I'm listening to you talk about how, like, when I was a kid, my father loved opera.
Yeah.
So he used to play it. He used to play it at night after dinner, and he would. And Puccini was his, and it is my favorite. And so he'd be. We'd be listening to, not that I wanted to listen to, but if I happened to be passing through the living room, he would tell me the story, and Tosca was was a big one for me, because that had so much drama, and not they all have drama, but that one just appealed to me. But I got to tell you, I can't sing a whit, so we had that same little something there, but you had that talent.
Yeah.
And so when you were a teenager, did you do, like most of us, the top tunes? And, is that what you were saying, that the conductors would say, "Oh, you sound too poppy"?
No, it's that the style from singing, because to put myself through college, I was singing I was doing a one-woman show on Miami Beach before Miami Beach was very she. I sang in every little hotel up and down the strip on Miami Beach, and sometimes I would do 2 and 3 shows a night. And I would follow the comedians. I used to have this tremendous repertoire of jokes. They've all gone away somehow. But I would do pop songs, I would do the jazz standards, and I would throw in a couple of arias. I would do Hebrew songs and Italian songs and Spanish songs. And it taught me a great deal about learning how to handle an audience and what it was to get still inside of myself. It was a challenge, and it was also very exciting. So I really didn't have a normal childhood at all, because from 10 years old I was on stage. From 10 years old, 5 years old I was modeling. 10 years old I was on stage, and I didn't walk off stage until I was 50 years old.
Wow!
So that's 40 years of travel, and when other kids did normal things, I didn't do anything that was normal, because I was running between rehearsals and running, down to Coral Gables and up to West Palm Beach, and it was fascinating. It was fascinating, but I did not get a chance to do what normal kids did, or even listen to the music. Now I know more of the music of the 80s and 90s because I actually listened to it. I didn't have time. I was always learning music.
And then you were really coming of age during that time.
Yes.
When did you sing your first opera?
When did I sing my first opera?
The first that you got paid for. Let me say it that way. When was the first opera that you actually got paid to perform in?
That I got paid to perform. Well, I started getting paid on Miami Beach. They would, pay me $20 and $50 and stuff like that. So that's when I was 15 and 16. My first opera, I think I was 17. I think I was 17 or 18. It was Rigoletto, and I was doing Maddalena. And actually, that was the last role I ever did in opera. And from then on, my first opera with orchestra was with Norman Traeger in Palm Beach in Faust. And then I did Traviata with Beverly Sills, and I was Nina, her maid. And it was an extraordinary experience. And it just kept getting more and more and more and more.
What was that like to be with Beverly Sills?
It was fascinating because I was the one who was fluffing her pillows and taking care of her in Act 4. And, so I saw a beautiful human with an exquisite sound, and I also saw a very tired human. It amazed me because I was right next to her. I was amazed how tired she seemed to me, and that surprised me. Of course, I was very young at the time, but I still picked that up. I thought, wow, she gives this appearance of being totally energetic, and yet I could see this exhaustion in her, and I thought, wow. But I didn't connect the dots until much later in my life, until I felt that exhaustion.
So it was age related.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if it was age related or just schedule related.
We all get that way.
The schedule of an opera singer, when you add jet lag and travel.
Sure.
And all that she was doing. I mean, she was running an opera company, so she was doing an enormous amount of things. So
whenever I would see her, she would be full of energy and full of life, and
they didn't call her Bubbles for nothing. Yeah,
she was really something.
Yeah, she was.
Audrey, we need to take a break. But I want to talk. I was watching a YouTube video that you did. I'd like to talk about that when we come back. And everybody, if you just all hang in there with us, we'll be right back. You're listening to the Friday Happy Hour.
Hi, this is Annmarie Kelly, author, victory strategist, and the radio show host of the Friday Happy Hour. I trust you're enjoying my conversation with this fabulous, victorious woman. If you're getting inspired with ideas and feeling empowered, this is just the tip of the iceberg. There's more for you. Tips, downloads, resources at the Victorious Woman Project. Go to victoriouswoman.com and look around and get on my mailing list so you can be the first to know about the newest good things I have for you. That's www.victoriouswoman.com.
Welcome back to the Friday Happy Hour. I'm Annmarie Kelly, and I'm here with Adria Firestone. Adria, I'm wondering I was listening, the YouTube video I was referring to was one that you talked about, that it was about the Me Too movement. Mm-hmm. And I knew a conductor, I don't know if you knew him, Dr. Carl Supa.
I've heard the name. And I did not work with him, but I've heard the name. Yeah.
His spouse was one of my teachers. And and he, like you, traveled, he was gone for long periods of time. And Mrs. Supa was young, and she would tell stories about how things could be on the road. And excuse me, my alums and I often laugh about some of the things that she told us. And but there was a lot of stuff that used to go on when people were on the road, and for you that was happening in the years before when the Me Too movement wasn't even a whisper of a whisper.
Right.
So I'm curious, what was it like as a young woman in opera?
Well, and a young woman in theater, period, in opera and musical theater, I'm going to say that has the abuse, when women are taken advantage of, when people think that they have the right to do so. I think, and this is kind of a strange way to look at it, but my abuse happened early in my life, and it was family and then friends, and I will certainly put the word friends in quotes, who abused me. So what happened is I developed a very, very a hard shell that was there when I needed it. I had armor around me. And what I learned to do was, because I was doing roles like Carmen that were very sexy, and I was doing roles like Amneris and Delilah that were very sexy and very appealing. Well, people associate you with a role, and so they take certain things for granted. And what I learned to do was use humor to keep my boundaries extremely strong. There was something inside of me. I'm not saying that the neediness that I had inside of me was certainly there. There was, please love me, which is why a lot of people, I think, go to show business to find love. And the people in the dark don't know who you are, and especially if you're a good artist, they're not supposed to know who you are. They're supposed to fall in love with the character that you create.
Right.
So what I've learned and what I often teach my students at the university is use humor, but make sure that that boundary stays there. And what I always tried to do, it didn't always work. I mean, I had some, conductors and some directors say to me, "You'll never work in this town again." I got that thrown at me. And I laughed, and I had a lot of humor. And after a while, even when I turned down something that they wanted me to do, even if it was a role, not just a sexual advance, but something that they wanted me to do that I didn't feel I was ready to do. And you'll never work in this town again. And then 2 years later, they needed me, and one of the conductors, who was my first conductor, Dr. Chonka, wrote me a note that said, "From Bing to Kalas, you're impossible, but also impossible not to love." And so I realized that my standing up for what I believed in the end, you generate a lot of respect. And that is very tough in the workplace. It's tough to balance, to stay on that thin line of not making it about the person themselves, but about their behavior. And that simply will not work for me. This is where it stops. And you think I'm ready to do anything to get ahead. Well, I'm not. You've come to the wrong person. But it can cost you a great deal. Now, that is less, it is happening less because women are banding together and because we are speaking up, as we should have many years ago. But this is something that was taken for granted. It was what we were taught, to put our heads down and shut up and say yes.
Yeah.
And make yourself less. Don't be so shining and so big and so strong because you'll intimidate people. Well, tough luck is my reply to that.
But it was.
I want us to shine as big. I mean, the Dalai Lama said at the Vancouver Peace Summit in 2009, Western women will save the world. And I believe that with all my soul. And the only way we're going to do that is for us to stand up and say, here I am, these are my boundaries. And if you don't like it, that's your problem. But this is who I am.
Yeah, and, when we were coming up, and I don't think it's like this so much now, but when we were coming up, it was a lot of that, well, boys will be boys kind of thing. Yeah, and we don't.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think that it's different now. But listen, so that I appreciate that you sharing that, because I was curious about that. Now about your opera career, what are some of them? What do you have a favorite opera or a favorite role?
Well, I was certainly well known for my Carmen, and I did love her very much because Carmen and I grew up together. I hid behind her in my life because she was so strong and so powerful, and I admired that. Even though I didn't feel that way when I started, I was able to hide behind this tremendously strong character, which gave me a lot of confidence. But my favorite role to sing is Delilah in Samson and Delilah. The music is it's ravishing. It's just ravishing.
Very nice. And you talked about performing with Beverly Sills. What are some of the other, do you have any other highlights? Like, I'm sure you do, but can you share one or two with us from your opera career?
You mean of stars that I sang with?
Well, just maybe places that you performed.
Oh, places. Okay. Places, well, I felt, for the first time in my life, I felt like a rock star when I was in China, when I was in Shanghai. The audience went so crazy over what we were doing that they literally surged onto the stage. I had not experienced something like that, and it shocked me. And it wasn't just that they were asking for autographs, is that their appreciation of the art of performance and of singing was so much. It was so much that it was almost overwhelming. It was extraordinary.
You must have loved it. I would have loved it.
It was fun. Oh,
Yeah,
it was enormous fun. And another time when I would do a lot of, because as I said, I did a lot of Carmens all over the world, the children, because there were always the children's choruses, and the children would adore me and I would adore them, and they would write me the most beautiful little notes and draw pictures, and one of them drew a picture of me saying, I love your hair, I love your costume, you dyed really beautiful, and I want to be you when I grow up.
That's
and another
cool.
one said, I'm going to be you for Halloween. To me, those are the best reviews I ever got.
Oh, that's
Those are the ones that are really great.
So you did all of that for years, and then as you headed towards 50, I was reading something that you wrote in Huffington Post, and I think so many of my listeners, the women and the men, will be able to identify. In your piece, you called it Singer's Addiction, and I think the title was Singer's Addiction is a Time for a Career Change, and and in it you say there were four questions, but one of them that just struck me, that people were saying, well, get me an Adria Firestone, and then it was, get me a young Adria Firestone.
Exactly. Well, I always, when I'm giving talks to universities, especially, and I'm talking about performance, I tell them that those four questions are very important. Who is Adria Firestone? Because nobody knows who you are. Then get me Adria Firestone, because you're the hottest thing since sliced bread and everybody wants you. And then get me a young Adria Firestone, because you're not 20 years old anymore. And then finally, it's who is Adria Firestone again? And that we have to keep that. I think that those four phrases are very important, because it doesn't matter whether you're a singer or whether you're in a powerful position at work or whether you are used to being an executive secretary who handles an entire office and makes things run like clockwork. It doesn't matter what your success is or what your role that you're operating through. That will change as you get older. And one of the things that I think causes us great unhappiness is that we try to live 30 times 1 year, instead of realizing 30 years have indeed passed. And instead of us trying to hold our faces up and our adorable boobs, we have to say, no, they're sagging. My face is sagging. This is life. But look at the wisdom that I've gained. Let me walk into who I am, because one of the characteristics of what I view one of the most valuable things about youth is flexibility. And if we're trying to hold on what made us great in the past, what we're doing is limiting ourselves greatly. We're trying to repeat the 30 years. We're trying to do it 30 times. Well, no. Move on in the way that our lives, our nature, takes us from the sunrise to the sunset of our lives. And when we reach that midpoint, if we can embrace all of the lessons we have learned, all of the pain that we have undergone, all that we have gone through, and say, this is who I am a wise woman. If you can embrace that, yes, people are going to want to get younger people. Well, you know something? I say let's move over and let them in. Because not only do the younger people have a right to come in and do their work, do you realize that maybe 80% of jobs in the next 20 or 30 years are going to be phased out by robots? So what we're left with is, let's develop who we are as people. Let's develop who we are as humans, and what are we giving to this earth? Because in the end, yes, I was an opera singer, schmock singer. In the end, I'm Adria. All of the pain, all of the joy, all of the experiences that I have gone through, that in the end is what I'm left with. I am left with how I touch another human on this earth. That is the value.
And you know what, Adria, I think that really is true. And I think that it's a good thing to remind ourselves. It's a good thing that you're reminding us that, all of those years did give us wisdom, did give us experience, and did give us a perspective that you can't possibly get any other way. I say that with, as I've been talking about my book, The 5-Year Marriage. If my book had come out 20 years ago when I wrote the first draft, right, I don't think I would be able to talk about it with the wisdom that I can talk about it now, because I have all of that much more experience with marriage than I had 20 years ago.
And we wise women, we are needed. We are needed, and our wisdom is needed. I think it's our responsibility to help educate the younger ones to say, hey, chickie babies, listen up. We have something to say.
I think it's getting them to listen to us. That's the key.
Who we have become proudly, then we walk into new phases of our lives, and it can be super exciting. If not, I would have stayed at the bottom of a well, crying, poor me, singing that particular aria. It doesn't suit me.
Audrey, when we come back, I want to spend just a couple of minutes on that crash and burn period, but I want to talk a little bit about some of the lessons from your book, You Are the Artist of Your Life. So everybody stay with us. You're listening to the Friday Happy Hour.
Remember when you wished you had more time for yourself, and now you have it, but you notice you're keeping busy with stuff, but that stuff isn't making you feel happy or filled up? And when you think about what would make you happy and filled up, you get stuck or feel overwhelmed. And then you go back to what's more familiar, more comfortable, even if it's not making you happy. Wouldn't you love to find a way to start making sense of that deep discontent you're feeling? Well, you're not alone. I'm Annmarie Kelly, author, victory strategist, and the radio show host of the Friday Happy Hour. And I know there's a place for you, one that other women have found to be both inspirational and empowering. And it's the Victorious Woman Project. Go there now and get on my mailing list, where you'll be the first to know about my upcoming online workshops, teleseminars, and more. And while you're there, take a couple minutes to look over my blog. You can download some of the free stuff I have for you and let it get your creative juices going. I'm looking forward to meeting you at the Victorious Woman Project. And that's at www.victoriouswoman.com.
Welcome back to the Friday Happy Hour. I'm Annmarie Kelly, and I'm here with Adria Firestone. And Adria, you had that crash and burn period of time, and you were about 50 when it happened, and it lasted a long time for you.
A very long time.
So how did you get out of it? What was the beginning of the end of it?
Well, I can't say that I sat in this well of depression continuously, but it was a very dark period, because when I walked off stage, the problem with defining yourself by any job, doesn't matter what the job is that suddenly I put that down. And I turned around and looked at myself and said, who am I? What do I like? Who am I now? And I had no idea. So my MO, when I'm scared and don't know what to do, is to start trying things. I'm one who kind of gets to work. So I founded a construction company for my husband, who's a fabulous, fabulous carpenter. And I founded an organizer bunny company. And I started teaching at a university. And I started writing books. And I became a life coach, trying to figure myself out. And then realizing, you know something? I started to realize that my purpose was not as an entertainer, although I loved what I did. But that's not my purpose on this earth. My purpose on this earth is to give what I understand of light, to enable other people to recognize their own light and to be able to use it, to realize how powerful and how magnificent they are, because society teaches us that we're not. And so my purpose is to say, do you see how magnificent you are, and do you realize that you have the power of choice? And even if you don't make a choice, you're making a choice? So coaching enables me to do that, and I see people growing into themselves and blossoming into themselves. And that thrills me to death. I had this woman who hated her job, hated her job. And literally, we had this wonderful group, Life Design Formula, this great group, and lo and behold, less than 6 months later, she had her dream job, decided we had done all sorts of going from the inside out and going from the outside in, wanted to change how her house looked, lo and behold, moved out of her apartment and purchased a home with her love. And she looks like she's 20 years younger. Wow. I looked at this woman and I said, Caroline, you're amazing. This is so beautiful to see you blossoming like this. So,
and you know what, Adria, that's one of the things I have to say that your book is easy to read because there's 50 chapters, but every chapter is 1 page long. 1 page long, that's it. And one of them is about the tiniest bit of light dispels the darkness, which is what you're talking about. Yes. And in that little chapter, you talk about how a little bit of light in a movie theater can disrupt your experience, and so how a little bit of light when you're living in darkness can disrupt that experience. But here's and I think one of the ways to find that, the 3 things that have helped one of my clients, Millie, everything changed for her is, one is that she reached out for help. And that is enormous. That is just enormous. Don't try to do it alone. Get help from a counselor, from a clergyman, if that's what you believe. It's not go to your friend, your best friend, who's going to say, you poor darling, don't worry, everything is fine, because everything is not fine, or you wouldn't be in this condition. And 2 is journaling. If you start journaling and you start writing down all the pain that's in your heart, pour it out on the paper, because you know no one's going to read it. This is for you. You write it down, you just pour it out on the paper, and you let it go. And you actually respectfully honor your feelings. You say, this is really how I'm feeling. And finally, meditation. Those 3 things is I got help as well. This is what I went through. This was my process. I started to get help. I was journaling. I tried every modality. I tried EMDR. I tried all sorts of things that were going to help me understand where this subconscious self-sabotage was. And so writing about it is even if it's not about reading it later, you just write it. You just get it out of you. Well, you know what, Adria, I have to tell you, one of the things I do with that is that's a technique I teach in the workshops that I do. And it's not just the journaling, but what I do, and I've used it to help people let go of the anger that they have for getting laid off and stuff. But they write it down, and they write down, I always say, write down every single vile thought you have. Oh, yes, I agree. Oh, and then you write it and write it and write it until, I can remember there were times when I would write on a yellow pad 6 or 7 pages. Yes. But of course, I wouldn't want anybody to ever read anything that I wrote because it was doesn't it lose its power? And Marie, once you write that much, don't you just get tired of listening to your own whining? And after a while, you say, okay, well, so that's where I was. Well, you hug yourself and you say, sweetheart, that's okay for you to have felt that way. Well, what I do with that is I take those yellow pages or whatever I'm writing on, and I put a match to them. Oh, perfect. I burn them up because, you know what, Adria, that changes the energy from whatever that energy was inside of me. I put a match to it, and so that changes the energy. And you are so right. And then I have a burning bowl that I use. It's a stainless steel burning bowl. And then I flush it down the toilet, which to me symbolizes a cleansing. Yes, yes, yes. That's exactly what I did. I actually found pictures of my abuse.
turned my stomach, couldn't get rid of them. Finally, I did a lot of writing. I finally burned them, and that's what I did. I flushed them down the toilet. I said, that's what this is. It is refuse, and it's over, and it's gone.
And I remember there was a guy who had lost his job. He worked for a startup. The startup went belly up. He was working far away from his family because it was the only job that he could get, and he couldn't. It was far enough away he couldn't even come home on the weekends.
Wow!
But he couldn't get a job, and I suggested this to him. And he did it for about 2 weeks because, to me, it doesn't always happen like magic. The first time doesn't, you don't get it already. And he did it about 2 weeks. And then he said, and this is what I noticed, you probably noticed the same thing, that all of a sudden it's like a cloud lifts. And then whatever those negative feelings aren't inside you anymore. And then the next interview he went on, he got another job. So
there we go.
Yeah, it was really kind of fascinating.
It changes the energy completely.
Yep. So,
and I love the idea of fire. I think that's great.
Now, another one of the things that we're running out of time, Adria, but I did want to get to this. The chapter title is "Everything You Want Is on the Other Side of Your Fear."
Yeah.
And for those of us who are experiencing so many changes in our lives, and physical, mental, emotional, and and people leaving our lives and whatever, we have almost as much fear now as when we were teenagers.
Yeah.
And it's like, and then if you want to move on to something new, what if I make a mistake, or what if I fail? What if I find out I can't do it? And then it's so funny now. And what if I want people to like me? Well, what if they don't like me? So what do we do about that, being on the other side of our fear?
Well, I think that there are 3 keys, I would say, to be able to get to the other side of fear. Is one, again, what I said before about feeling it. Accept it. Don't try to push it down and pretend it isn't there, because then it's like a beach ball. No matter how strong you are, eventually, if you hold it underwater, eventually it'll pop up and hit you in the nose.
Yeah, I agree.
So accept exactly where you are. Accept exactly what is. Then ask. These are 3 A's. Accept, ask, and act. So the first is accept exactly where you are. Then start asking, what is the worst that can happen? Well, so I might fail. So they might hate me. Yeah, they might. There is no guarantee, and you can't ever make anybody love you. Ever, ever, ever. You can enchant them for 5 minutes, and that's about it. So ask, what is the worst that can happen? And then get to work to improve or to prevent that worst from ever happening. And you will find that when you are in action, you can't feel the tremendous anxiety and fear. You can't do it both at the same time.
Yeah, you can't. Your mind can't have both thoughts at the same time.
It can't. One cancels the other out. And also to realize that if you have the most gorgeous car, let's just pick an Alfa Romeo. You have the Alfa Romeo. It's bright red. It's gorgeous. It's sitting there. You're sitting in the car, and you're saying, well, I want to go. And I say, well, Annmarie, where are you going? Well, I know I'm going. But where? You have to pick a destination. Even, remember that a plane course corrects 1,000,000 times before it gets to its destination. You have to put the car in gear and start moving, and then your angels can course correct. But if you are sitting there in the most gorgeous car in the world, you're not going to go anywhere. Because you're not in flow. You're not in motion. Risk the failure. Just fail fast. It didn't work. Next. That's what they say in show business.
I like that.
Sometimes they don't even say thank you. They just say next.
I know. I like that. Listen, Adria, we have to go. And I know that you have something for my listeners. I put a link on the radio wrap-up at victoriouswoman.com. So listeners, you can go to the victoriouswoman.com, go to the radio wrap-up, click on the link, and you'll see what Adria has for you. Adria, thanks for coming today.
Oh, my joy and my pleasure. Blessings on all your beautiful heads. Let's save the world, huh?
There you go. Yes, there we go.
Thank you, Annmarie.
Have a fabulous weekend.
Okay, ciao.
Ciao. And the same to you, Victory Chicks and you guys. And here's my quote for you. We're running short on time. This one is from Natalie Babbitt, who wrote that show Tuck Everlasting. And she said, the first week of August hangs at the very top of summer, the top of the livelong year, like the highest seat of a Ferris wheel when it pauses in its tuning. The weeks that come before are only a climb from a balmy spring, and those that follow drop to the chill of autumn. But the first week of August is motionless and hot. It's curiously silent, with blank white dawns and glaring noons and sunsets smeared with too much color. That's what I'm wishing for you. We're coming up to that first week of August. Have a fabulous week, and thanks for being here today. I hope you come back next Friday. Chen's on.
Thanks for listening to this Friday Happy Hour. Make sure you subscribe, rate and review today's show. And join us again next week for the Friday Happy Hour with Annmarie Kelly.